It was interesting to talk Italian, however little way it went. "Molto bene," said he, "and it's delightful to have you home again. And how was London?" he asked, in the sort of tone in which he might have inquired after the health of a poor relation who was not likely to recover. She smiled rather sadly. "Terrifically busy about nothing," she said. "All this fortnight I have scarcely had a moment to myself. Lunches, dinners, parties of all kinds. I could not go to half the gatherings I was bidden to. Dear good South Kensington, Chelsea too. Carissima, when London does manage to catch you, it is no wonder it makes the most of you," he said. "You mustn't blame London for that." "No, dear, I don't. Everyone was tremendously kind and hospitable. They all did their best. If I blame anyone, I blame myself. But I think this Riseholme life, with its finish and its exquisiteness, spoils one for other places. London is like a railway junction. It has no true life of its own. There is no delicacy, no appreciation of fine shades. Individualism has no existence there. Everyone gabbles together, gabbles and gobbles. Am not I naughty? If there is a concert in a private house, you know my views about music and the impossibility of hearing music at all if you are stuck in the middle of a row of people. Even then, the moment it is over, you are whisked away to supper, or somebody wants to have a few words. There is always a crowd, there is always food, you cannot be alone, and it is only in loneliness, as Goethe says, that your perceptions put forth their flowers. No one in London has time to listen. They are all thinking about who is there and who isn't there, and what is the next thing. The exquisite present, as you put it in one of your poems, has no existence there. It is always the feverish future." Delicious phrase! I should have stolen that gem for my poor poems, if you had discovered it before. She was too much used to this incense to do more than sniff it in unconsciously, and she went on with her tremendous indictment. "It isn't that I find fault with London for being so busy," she said with strict impartiality, "for if being busy was a crime, I am sure there are few of us here who would escape hanging. But take my life here, or yours for that matter, well, mine if you like. Often and often I am alone from breakfast till lunchtime, but in those hours I get through more that is worth doing than London gets through in a day and a night. I have an hour at my music, not looking about and wondering who my neighbours are, but learning, studying, drinking in divine melody. Then I have my letters to write, and you know what that means. And I still have time for an hour's reading, so that when you come to tell me lunch is ready, you will find that I have been wandering through Venetian churches, or sitting in that little dark room at Weimar, or was it Leipzig? How would those same hours have passed in London? Sitting, perhaps, for half an hour in the park, with dearest Aggie pointing out to me with thrills of breathless excitement a woman who was in the divorce court, or a coroneted bankrupt. Then she would drag me off to some terrible private view, full of the same people all staring at and gabbling to each other, or looking at pictures that made poor me gasp and shudder. No, I am thankful to be back at my own sweet Riseholme again. I can work and think here." She looked round the panelled entrance hall with a glow of warm content at towing it home again that quite eclipsed the mere physical heat produced by her walk from the station. Wherever her eyes fell, those sharp dark eyes that resembled buttons covered with shiny American cloth, they saw nothing that jarred, as so much in London jarred. There were bright brass jugs on the window-sill, a bowl of potpourri on the black table in the centre, an oak settee by the open fireplace, a couple of Persian rugs on the polished floor. The room had its quaintness too, such as she had alluded to in her memorable essay read before the Riseholme Literary Society, called "Humour in Furniture," and a brass milk can served as a receptacle for sticks and umbrellas. Equally quaint was the dish of highly realistic stone fruit that stood beside the potpourri, and the furry Japanese spider that sprawled in a silk web over the window. Such was the fearful verisimilitude of this that Lucia's new housemaid had once fled from her duties in the early morning to seek the assistance of the gardener in killing it. The dish of stone fruit had scored a similar success, for once she had said to Georgie Pilson, "Ah, my gardener has sent in some early apples and pears. Won't you take one home with you?" It was not till the weight of the pear (he swiftly selected the largest) betrayed the joke, that he had any notion that they were not real ones. But then Georgie had had his revenge, for, waiting his opportunity, he had inserted a real pear among those stony specimens, and again passing through with Lucia, he picked it out, and with lips drawn back had snapped at it with all the force of his jaws. For the moment she had felt quite faint at the thought of his teeth crashing into fragments. These humorous touches were altered from time to time. The spider, for instance, might be taken down and replaced by a china canary in a Chippendale cage. And the selection of the entrance hall for those whimsicalities was intentional, for guests found something to smile at as they took off their cloaks and entered the drawing-room with a topic on their lips, something light, something amusing about what they had seen. For the gong similarly was sometimes substituted a set of bells that had once decked the collar of the leading horse in a waggoner's team somewhere in Flanders. In fact, when Lucia was at home, there was often a new little quaintness for quite a sequence of days, and she had held out hopes to the Literary Society that perhaps some day, when she was not so rushed, she would jot down material for a sequel to her essay, or write another covering a rather larger field on the gambits of conversation derived from furniture. On the table there was a pile of letters waiting for Mrs. Lucas, for yesterday's post had not been forwarded her for fear of its missing her. London postmen were probably very careless and untrustworthy, and she gave a little cry of dismay as she saw the volume of her correspondence. "But I shall be very naughty," she said, "and not look at one of them till after lunch. Take them away, Caro, and promise me to lock them up till then, and not give them me however much I beg. Then I will get into the saddle again, such a dear saddle too, and tackle them. I shall have a stroll in the garden till the bell rings. What is it that Nietzsche says about the necessity to Mediterranize yourself every now and then? I must rhizome myself." Peppino remembered the quotation, which had occurred in a review of some work of that celebrated author, where Lucia had also seen it, and went back with the force of contrast to aid him to his prose poem of loneliness, while his wife went through the smoking parlour into the garden in order to soak herself once more in the cultured atmosphere. In this garden behind the house there was no attempt to construct a Shakespearean plot, for, as she so rightly observed, Shakespeare, who loved flowers so well, would wish her to enjoy every conceivable horticultural treasure. But furniture played a prominent part in the place, and there were statues and sundials and stone seats scattered about with almost too profuse a hand. Mottos also were in great evidence, and while a sundial reminded you that tempus fugit, an enticing resting place somewhat bewilderingly bade you to bide a wee. But then again the rustic seat in the pleached alley of laburnums had carved on its back, "Much have I travelled in the realms of gold," so that, meditating on Keats, you could bide a wee with a clear conscience. Indeed, so copious was the wealth of familiar and stimulating quotations, that one of her subjects had once said that to stroll in Lucia's garden was not only to enjoy her lovely flowers, but to spend a simultaneous half-hour with the best authors. There was a dovecot, of course, but since the cats always killed the doves, Mrs. Lucas had put up around the desecrated home several pigeons of Copenhagen china, which were both imperishable as regards cats, and also carried out the suggestion of humour in furniture. The humour had attained the highest point of felicity when Peppino concealed a mechanical nightingale in a bush, which sang jug jug in the most realistic manner when you pulled a string. Georgie had not yet seen the Copenhagen pigeons, or, being rather short-sighted, thought they were real. Then Peppino pulled the string, and for quite a long time Georgie listened entranced to their melodious cooings. That served him out for his trap about the real pear introduced among the stone specimens. For, in spite of the rarefied atmosphere of culture at Riseholme, Riseholme knew how to discipere in loco, and its strenuous culture was often refreshed by those light, refined